Hi everyone. So my name is Trevon Adams, and my project is pretty much a database management system for a coffee shop. And pretty much what it'll do is kind of walk through and talk a little bit about how the business is structured, and then what are some of the tools that were used to kind of put together the database management system, how the user forms will work, and then kind of the tables that the data is stored on, what they're used for, and what type of data is stored on there, and then just kind of finally finish up with some of the benefits of having this database management system used in a small coffee shop business. So in any business, it's essential to be able to track or record, update, delete data if necessary. Um, and it's part of a way to kind of build efficiency and also accommodate growth in any business. So using Microsoft SQL Server, Microsoft Visual Studios, um, we're able to put together a user input form as well as design the database to capture all the necessary data to effectively manage the coffee house, which includes the employee data, vendor data, transactions, um, orders that are placed, accurately calculate prices of items, as well as apply discounts as necessary for customers who benefit from that service. So the database management system, by centralizing the data, we're better able to identify trends and manage the business, essentially giving them a competitive advantage. So this is our user form. This form was designed using Microsoft Visual Studios, and what it'll be used for is for the employee to use at the time of making a sale. So I'll just briefly go over what the form contains. So pretty much we have a list of all the menu items, and what the employee will then do is input the amount of whatever that item is. So for example, if a customer comes in one day and they order two iced coffees in one scone, then in the iced coffee text box, they'll, depending on if it's small or large, they'll enter that number, one small, one large iced coffee, and on their scones, they'll enter one. Now, in the back end of this form, it'll perform all the calculations based on the established prices of coffee, small coffees, large coffees, scones, a lemon cake, and it'll give a subtotal, and it'll then require a discount code. So if the customer is a USF Tampa student or a USF St. Pete student, they'll benefit from a discount, and the employee will then hit that radio button, and automatically that discount will be applied to the order. Once that's applied, the total price will come up, and the employee will then hit the purchase button, which will then move all the data inputted into the form to a SQL Server database, which will house all that transaction history. So the employee, which is the front end user, will be able to easily make that transaction and apply the relative data that's needed, without having the burden of doing calculations, trying to figure out what the percentage discount is. All of that will automatically be calculated in the back end of this form, and that data will then be pushed once the purchase is complete to that SQL Server database table. And in the next slide or two, we'll start talking about the tables, and I'll just go over how those tables are structured and then what type of data is coming into there that'll ultimately benefit the business. All right, so tables are pretty much the backbone of any database. What this database will do is utilize 10 tables, storing data for all components of the business. All right. So all tables in the database can be edited to add new data, update existing data, and delete data if necessary, based on the appropriate controls. One key thing about how the database is designed is that the tables have built-in control features to ensure data integrity when a user is making an update. So, for example, if a new employee comes on board, that employee is required to provide certain information, a social security number, an address, a telephone number. If the amount of digits for a social security number is less or more than the actual social security number, it'll pop an error saying, correct social security number, or if the telephone number is less digits than it's supposed to be, it'll pop that error message saying, make that adjustment, just so that the data that goes into the database is pretty much what we refer to as clean data. So we're looking at a sample of the employee table, and this is a key feature on the employee table is each employee is assigned an employee ID, and this is unique to them. So even if we have two employees with the same name, their employee IDs will be different, making it easy to differentiate them. Also, it reduces redundancy in entering information repeatedly on different places for an employee. All the employee information is logged in one place, stored in one table, and then that information or that data is used to replicate and trend for other needs. The equipment table holds the serial number for all the equipment that's utilized in the coffee shop, the date that we purchased it, and when was it last maintained, that piece of equipment, because that's critical for us to know when we start calculating our maintenance schedule for equipment. All right, the equipment type table will then assign a unique equipment ID to each piece of equipment that we own. The business and the model number of that equipment, a brief description of what that equipment is, and what's the interval as well that the equipment is supposed to be maintained based on the manufacturer's suggestions. So the discount table is a critical one for us to be able to calculate those discounts that we give to the customers of the coffee house. This data is only stored once, so there's no need for every time the discount is logged, an entry has to be made for the discount amount. The database allows us to be efficient and store data only once and then call that data and that information whenever we need it. Right, and much like the employee table, the vendor table follows the same structure. We have a vendor ID assigned to each vendor, a unique ID, as well as all the information pertinent to that vendor where we can always get on to them whenever we need to place an order. Much like the employee table, again, this data is only stored once and updated as needed. And then finally, the database is going to allow us to run views as well as reports, which is pretty much taking the data that we stored on those tables and actually turning it into information, making it useful for management to be able to effectively run the business, right? So they can be used for security management purposes by restricting user access sensitive data, and views store complex data retrieval instructions so that users can access the data without having to write their queries. So one of the views that'll be run is the vendor order view, and pretty much what this will give is all the items that have been ordered, what's the item number, a description of it, what's the price, what's the profit margin on those orders that we've made. So at any time, management can run this quick view or report and they can have a snapshot. Okay, this is what's going on with the vendor orders at any point in time. Also, daily revenues. This is critical to any business. So the coffee house will benefit from being able to see their daily revenues, each transaction for that day, as well as an individual order total, and then it sums up to the total order for that day. So ultimately, the database will be able to efficiently manage all the data for the coffee house. It'll be able to give management an easier way to manage the business, a centralized place to manage the data, as well as reduce redundancy in the business.